Hey everyone, can you believe it? We're back, baby. And I'm so excited to be back. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who supported me in the Friends with Alysa hiatus. But again, we are back. Thank you for the support. And thank you to my latest patron, Sarah. Welcome to Friends with Alysa, the tea party, the whatever you'd like to call it, where you get all sorts of goodies for supporting Best Forevers, a podcast for kindred spirits, fatalities, and the upcoming Unrequited, which is coming out on March 28th. Yes, that's this month, friends. So if you want to be like Sarah and become friends with Alysa, check me out on patreon.com/friends with Alysa. We got early releases of episodes. We have special drops of Alysa Watches TV. Upcoming is Euphoria. We have mini true crime episodes, one about spree killers and March Madness coming up. Lots of good things. Besides that, there's also tea and goodies and all sorts of fun stuff. So check us out, and thanks for listening, friends. You're listening to Best Forevers, a podcast for kindred spirits, a podcast that encourages you to love more in your friends and to further consider the issues that plague friendships. I'm Alysa Lucas, and I want to know, are you missing anything? Check yourself. Okay, Ice Cube, check yourself before you wreck yourself. No, check yourself out. Are you missing anything? Okay, so I'm reminded of the scene from the most wonderful movie ever, Pretty in Pink, where high school student Andy is talking to her music store boss, Iona, about prom. And Andy says, "Did you say you went to your prom, Iona?" "Yeah, sure." "Was it terrible?" "It was the worst, but it's supposed to be, but you have to go, right?" And Andy says, "You don't have to. It's not a requirement." And then she comes back with, "I have this girlfriend who didn't go to hers. Every once in a while, she gets in this real terrible feeling, like something is missing. She checks her purse, she checks her keys, she counts her kids, she goes crazy. And then she realizes that nothing is missing. She decided it was side effects from skipping the prom." Andy says, "I don't know. Part of me is like, go and get it over with. And this other part of me says, it's a stupid tradition. And what's the point?" And Iona says, "Well, you could say life itself is a stupid tradition, but don't analyze it, just go." For me, I was thinking about this because we've been missing some of our little stupid traditions, and I'm hoping we can safely get back to them soon. So what are these stupid little traditions? Being friendish with others. Acquaintances, casual buddies. We've been missing out on this because of the pandemic, but we need them back because they do so much good for us. And before we get into that, I want to give major props and shout outs to my pod friend Kelly from Boobies and Newbies. We were recording a new episode of her podcast and she used this term and it got me thinking. And if you know anything about me, you know what happens next. An episode is born. Hi, welcome to episode 155 of Best Forevers, entitled Friendish. Second, this topic is brought to you by patrons and listeners who voted on Patreon and social media sites between this topic, Friendish, and a topic about those friends we have in middle school. But don't worry, if you voted for the middle school topic, that'll be coming up. I'll be collecting examples for that episode, so feel free to email me at friendswithalysa@gmail.com if you want to share the joy and the cringe of middle school friendships. Let's just say mine included perms. Thanks, 80s/90s, and my mom. Finally, y'all, it's been a while. I haven't been feeling well, and when it's a team of me, my editor, and the advice I get from my PR team of college students, it's hard to get episodes out. The team is not large. I'm the host. I'm not feeling well. How do I make these things happen? Well, I had to take a break, but I'm feeling so much better, and I'm glad to be back with episodes. And so I just wanted to thank you all for your patience and support. So let's get back into friendship. It's been so long. So what does it mean to be friendish? Being friendish refers to all our connections to folks that would not be labeled as quote-unquote best friends and not viewed as an intimate friendship. Like I said, Kelly used this word, and I liked it. I think it can represent a number of relationships, and these are called acquaintances, casual friends, Low-stakes friends, low-maintenance friends, or more famously known in the sociological academic circle where I know we're all hanging out, as weak ties. For example, I love chatting it up every 2 months with my hairstylist, joking with my next-door neighbors when I walk my dog, and doing the head nod thing to familiar folks as I walk across my college campus and where I work. And the work of Mark Granovetter set the foundation for how we understand why these connections are so important. The term he used was weak ties, which sounds terrible. It sounds like something we shouldn't value, but, I'm not here to critique the name, but that maybe we should pay more attention to these weak ties. And this was outlined in his 1973 article from the American Journal of Sociology, which, of course, you can find in my show notes. So here's his goal. Until this time, 1973, connections, friendships, and ties with others were more about quality. We had our bestest and closest friends. Those intimate relationships are the ones that enriched our lives, and we saw as being the key to perhaps our well-being. He calls these strong ties, and in his article, he talks about weak ties and the value that come from these lesser-known thought-about relationships. And nearly every article I read and used for today's episode uses Granovetter's work, and here are some of the common points that they highlight about his work. To begin, Amanda Mull wrote for The Atlantic in January 2021 about the work of Granovetter, stating weak ties, quote, comprise of acquaintances, people you see infrequently, and near strangers with whom you share some familiarity. They're the people on the periphery of your life, the guy who's always at the gym at the same time as you, the barista who starts making your usual order while you're still at the back of the line, the coworker from another department with whom you make small talk on the elevator. They're also people you might never directly meet, but you share something important in common. You go to the same concerts or live in the same neighborhood and frequent the same local businesses. You might not consider all of your weak ties friends, at least in the common use of the word, but there are often people with whom you are friendly. Most people are familiar with this idea of an inner circle. Granovetter posited that we also have an outer circle, vital to our social health in its own ways, end quote. So as we can see here, we're always perhaps concerned about the inner circle. What about my closest friends? Who's there for me during breakups? Who's there for me when I'm rejected from a job? Those sorts of things is what we often consider, but we don't consider how much good we get from our outer circle. So from Ian Leslie in the July 2020 piece for The Life Project states, quote, his central insight was that for new information and ideas, weak ties are more important to us than strong ones, end quote. For example, he found that most people find jobs for these weak ties and not the strong ties. So if you are on the job market, friends, it might not be your bestie who can help you get a job. It's going to be that person that you say hi to every third Monday at your university's library, or the person that you might always run into in the produce section at your local grocery store. That's what is critical to these weak ties, that it's a friend of a friend kind of feeling, right? We're part of the same community and we're going to help out our community members. So Ali Volpe, from a May 2019 article in the New York Times, indicates that Granovetter's research suggests those weak ties, quote, can have a positive impact on our well-being by helping us feel more connected to other social groups and empower us to be more empathetic. We're less lonely too, end quote. There's so many reasons why this is helpful, like the needing for belonging and feeling connected, and our social circles grow, and we learn more from these folks by expanding our worldview. So these are great people to have closely in that outer circle that you might not overlap in the same way that your closest friends do. You might not have the same similarities. You might not have the same way in which you resolve conflict, but these people might be fun and low maintenance and a little challenging, or you learn a little something from them, or they tell you about these great recommendations and other things of that nature. And so it's Gillian Sandstrom and Ashley Williams for Harvard Business Review. They talk about what it feels like to be recognized by other people. Jillian's research, quote, finds that people are happier on days when they say hi to a colleague in the hallway or have a brief conversation with a neighbor at the grocery store. In another of Jillian's studies, people who were asked to personalize a transaction at a coffee shop by smiling, making eye contact, and having a genuine social interaction with the barista felt about 17% happier and more socially connected than those who were asked to be efficient, end quote. So Jillian also talks about how these good interactions go because we're typically polite, or as she says, quote unquote, on our best behavior with people who we don't know well. These weak tie interactions are low cost and high reward. And it wasn't until this research by Mark Granovetter on weak ties did we start to understand how important they are to our daily lives and feelings of connectedness in this world. It also makes me think of one of my favorite quotes from the amazing one-season TV show Freaks and Geeks. If you haven't seen it, here's the thing. You need to see it. Young Sam Weir, a 9th grader, finds himself part of a geek crew, if you will. At the dinner table with his family, he's asked about making more friends, and Sam says, quote, "I don't need another friend. I already have 2, end quote. And you know what, Sam? You're right. You're perhaps good on your strong ties. You got 2 really close buddies that you do everything with, and they're there for you. But you might want to work on adding some more weak ties, buddy." Okay, so I always think about that. I already have 2. Well, how many weak ties do you have? Like, if you were to count it up, can you consider, like, how many of those connections that you might have on a daily, weekly, monthly, or yearly basis? I love the way that Ian Leslie talks about experience of weak ties in his July 2020 article. He talks about on how Monday nights he would go to choir practice and he would show up in a bad mood. I guess he had a case of the Mondays. He didn't really look forward to it. But here's the thing. When he left, he always left in a great mood. It was choir practice and his choir buddies that did that. Ian states, quote, "With a few exceptions, I wouldn't describe my fellow choir members as close friends. Most of them I barely know at all. We exchange brief chats, smiles, and the odd joke, but that's enough for me to come away feeling a little better about the world," end quote. So if you're not sure about going to choir practice on Monday night, or going to book club on Thursday, or trying a new class at your local library, it might be worth it to go. You might be in a bad mood, but when you leave, you might feel good about those interactions that you had. It seems then like weak ties serve a particular purpose that our strong ties do not. Need someone to keep a secret? Strong tie. Need social support after a breakup? Strong tie. Want to feel like you belong in a community? Weak tie. And that's what Dr. Roberta Satow talks about in her April 2021 article from Psychology Today. The high-stakes, strong ties of our friendships mean they're intimate in nature. Quote, "We share feelings about important aspects of our lives and about each other. We also depend on the other person for social support in difficult times, advice in times of conflict, and empathy in times of remorse. We feel known by them. The loss of high-stakes friend is painful. It has a noticeable impact on our lives," end quote. So one of the things is that when we get together with our strong ties, there's a lot of weight that comes with it. There's the history, the expectations, the needs, and not all that is necessarily the case in our weak ties. So Roberta Satow describes how low stakes are different. They're casual, they're not as emotional, there's not as much disclosure about ourselves or our feelings, and she describes it as, quote, "We don't feel known," which I know you're like, wait a minute. I thought Jillian just a minute ago was talking about how we can feel more connected. What we are talking about here is that known is all the disclosure and the feelings and all the things inside and out. But there is something about being recognized and included in part of community, and you don't have to know everyone's secrets and provide them advice about a serious life concern in a weak tie, right? We don't need that there, and we can still get those benefits. We may wish that our weak ties remained. Certainly, they're probably going to phase away, transition out, etc. But here's the thing about weak ties. It doesn't completely derail our lives if they do leave our lives. This description reminds me of my involvement with the Penn State University alumni group when I lived in the state of New York. I was on the executive board of this group, and I would go to these meetings where we'd chat about what we plan to do over food. And then, of course, we actually had those events that we planned, whether it be, watching the football game at Buffalo Wild Wings or having a picnic for high school students who were going to go to Penn State. It was a lot of fun to be around a wide range of Penn State grads, and it felt like I knew more about the area that I lived in. For example, one of the other e-board members was a realtor, another was retired and did a lot of home repairs and carpentry, and another worked for a local credit union. I feel like I had these connections with Penn State, where I went to school, and my town, and I got a chance to enjoy interactions like going to trivia and just chit-chatting about what we would want to do with other Penn State alums. But they didn't need to know about every single worry or issue I was facing. When I moved to Michigan, though, I never joined a group here because I'm too far away from them, but I definitely miss those connections, or what Granovetter would call weak ties, that I had with my New York Penn Staters. So let's think about this for a minute. Where have all the weak ties gone? Roberta Shaw continues in her article by showcasing that over the course of our lives, weak and strong ties play different roles. The pandemic certainly reminds us there can be many factors that impact our weak ties, and that's why I asked at the top of this episode if we're missing anything. Because weak ties have been tremendously hurt by the pandemic, working from home, social distancing, and more. And as I start this part of the episode, I certainly want to make it clear that wearing masks, social distancing, and all the other precautions we're taking is the right thing to do. It's important, though, that we've considered what we lost and what we might be able to do about it now. These weak ties have gone away because of social distancing and isolation, and what does that look like on a daily basis? According to the April 2020 Harvard Business Review article by Jillian Stanstrom and Ashley Weilands, we experience approximately 11 to 16 of these weak ties on any given day. And Guy Wrench of Psychology Today talked about one study in which people record how many people they interact with over 100 days. The average he found, 440 people. That's over 400 people that we interact with that are not our inner circle over 100 days. So let me apply this to my life. Besides email, social media, and text, I talked to my parents and my pets today. Even walking Finney, I didn't see any neighbors or even the postal worker, who will have sort of like this head nod wave thing. And, not seeing him, I guess, is sort of sad face. So it seems like on days I don't teach and interact with students, I've gone from at least 11 to 16 weak tie interactions to approximately 0 weak tie interactions. I don't see folks at the gym because I've delayed going during the latest surge of COVID. And I don't have a regular cashier at the grocery store because I don't want to go to the grocery store. I do Shipt. But I guess here's the good news. Because I have a Shipt membership, I can put my favorite Shipt shoppers in a special little group where I'm more likely to get them to buy my groceries or my Target order for me. So, hey, pandemic week time, me and Alysa, my Shipt shopper, we get along great. And those tech messages about what dentist sticks to get for Finney is about as good as it gets. But it's also perhaps a sign that I want or need more. And that's what Jillian and Ashley from that April 2020 article would suggest. Because we're missing out on these relationships, we need to create them. And if not, we might be at a loss for happiness. So Amanda Mull wrote in that Atlantic article in January 2021 about the feelings of what it's like not to have weak ties during the pandemic. She starts out her article talking about watching the Netflix TV show Emily in Paris and saying that she was sad when one of the characters is at a crowded bar watching sports. And this certainly resonates with me as we enter March and the NCAA tournament will take place, i.e. March Madness. Amanda talks about missing these joys and all the weak ties in her life. She writes, quote, Coworkers I didn't know well but chatted with in the communal kitchen, workers at the local coffee or sandwich shops who could no longer dawdle to chat. The depth and intensity of these relationships varied greatly. But these people were all, in some capacity, my friends, and there was also no substitute for them during the pandemic, except maybe Alysa from Shipped. Tools like Zoom and FaceTime, useful for maintaining closer relationships, couldn't recreate the ease of social serendipity or bring back the activities that bound us together, end quote. The author notes that we miss out on these folks, quote, the joys that make up a human life. I knew I was going to like Amanda's article when I saw that she interviewed friendship communication scholar Dr. William Rollins, and you can check out the earlier episode I had with him about friendship. It was quite an amazing interview, conversation, and episode. Now, Dr. Rollins said to Amanda, quote, living well is in some cloistered retreat with just a few folks. The way worlds are created is by people sharing with and recognizing each other, end quote. We need more than our close friends in our worlds. But if we focused on them in the isolation, it makes sense. But it's exhausting. And we have to think about what long-term impact there may be if we don't have these weak ties in our lives, or that we're distanced in spaces where those things happen, in the workplace, the coffee shop, and more. Amanda Mull highlighted that the sources for her article noted, quote, losing the incidental repeated social interactions that physical workplaces foster can make it especially difficult for young people and new hires to establish themselves within that complex social hierarchy of a workplace. Losing them can make it harder to progress and work as a whole, access development opportunities, and be recognized for your contributions. After all, no one can see you or what you're doing. These kinds of setbacks early in professional life can be especially devastating because the losses tend to compound. Fall behind right out the gate, and you're more likely to stay there. She continues, quote, the psychological effects of losing all but our closest ties can be profound. Peripheral connections tether us to the world at large. Without them, people sink into the compounding sameness of closed networks, end quote. So she's saying that without having these different folks that we interact with on a daily basis, then we are bound to be with the same people all the time who are likely to be similar to us because birds of a feather flock together, right? Amanda Mull finally spoke to Julianne Holt-Lundstad, a psychologist and neuroscientist at Brigham Young University, who was quoted as saying, quote, the scientific evidence suggests that we need a variety of kinds of relationships in our lives, and that different kinds of relationships or social roles can fulfill different kinds of needs, end quote. So without these relationships, what negative impacts are there? Do you sense these negative impacts already? Have you been missing these relationships for the last 2 years? Have you found ways to bring them into your life or to continue them despite the pandemic? And more importantly, what can we do about it? Well, first off, hands off my ship shopper, Alysa, y'all. She's mine. No, I joke, but for real, she's my ship shopper. In their Harvard Business Review article, one of the authors, Ashley, talked about receiving the following text message from a casual friend. It read, Ashley, how are you? I've been thinking about you and your partner in this COVID-19 environment. I hope you both are okay. This author wrote that, quote, she needed that check-in more than she realized, and it was a nice surprise to hear from a colleague she hadn't caught up with for a while. So, in fact, receiving that text message created some emotions in her, and it made her cry because we haven't had those interactions as much, and how many people have fallen to the wayside because we haven't seen them or they haven't helped us in some way or we haven't helped them. So some of the things that we can do is exactly what Ashley's colleague did. Try checking in with your weak ties. Now, this might not work for your local barista. Now, maybe that means you can head out to the coffee shop, and if you're comfortable doing so, going in masked up and interacting with them that way, or having a little chit chat with them if there's a drive-through, right? But if these casual friends or low maintenance friends, people that you might have worked with or seen around your workplace, maybe texting them, because it's helpful to recreate those connections by letting those specific folks know that you're thinking of them. So maybe think about the last 2 years. Who haven't you had the opportunity to connect with as often? Is this someone you can connect with on social media, via text, via email? And even just a simple message might be all the difference in the world for you and for them. In their article, they also suggest using 5 strategies, right? So using informal modes of communication. So I just asked, how can you contact them? It's okay to do social media or texting. And one of the things that you might also say is maybe don't expect a reply, because the last 2 years have been very difficult and stressful for a lot of different reasons, right? And they talk about, but set yourself an expectation that you will participate in short and simple conversations. So you might even be thinking like Alysa, maybe give Alysa a break and let other people have her as a ship shopper and go into Meijer and have some interactions with folks there. And for those of you who don't know, Meijer is the grocery store in the area in which I live. I forgot it's not nationwide known. And they say, talk about reaching out to those people that have affected you in the past, and, be ready to share something with that person about yourself. It doesn't have to be anything major. It could just be, hey, the latest TV show you're watching. I'm watching Criminal Minds, and let me tell you about that, right? So Ellie Volpe from that 2019 New York Times article suggests that building these times can happen by, quote, giving yourself permission to talk to familiar faces, shifting your attitude towards considering these weak ties, mirroring an expert's behavior, so thinking of someone who might be good at maintaining those ties and trying to emulate that yourself, and then trying to make those conversationals meaningful when you did have them. I started that with a quote, but that was overall paraphrased as an FYI. So what does this all mean? We, including Sam Weir from Freaks and Geeks, need our casual connections. We, like Andy from Pretty in Pink, should just go through with as many of those stupid little daily traditions of saying hi to people. Okay, she was going to prom, which is a major event for a teen, but we have to remember that all those weak ties and those minor conversations are helpful to our well-being and happiness as well. Now, in a 2016 Bustle article by Kat George, she indicates that we do need these casual friends. How many times can we say it? We need them. Reflect on them. Create them. Reach out to them. And she writes, quote, different people bring different things to your life. And just because you don't call someone your best friend, it doesn't mean they're not valuable to you. There's value in casual friends, party pals, soulmates, romantic partners, and besties. Everyone you spend time with enriches your life somehow, end quote. So if we just sort of wash our hands of them, we might be missing out on several benefits, from our well-being to even hearing about a job that we might be able to look into and get interviewed at, right? There's lots of things going on. Our world has changed, and thus so have our connections and relationships. But I hope after listening today that you get a sense of what perhaps we've lost, about these weak ties that don't get quite talked about enough. Maybe as we figure out how to manage the new world, these weak ties will become more prominent again. I worry that we have spent too much time away from these weak ties and that it could be hard to bring them back. But there still might be something we can do because there are so many benefits. And here are a few to remember and focus on. And this comes from that Bustle article by Kat George, that there are 8 reasons for casual friends. Now, there is a range, right? From barista to hairstylist to someone that you work with that you only see once a month. But the idea is that connecting with these folks can be relaxing. It takes away the pressure that we might experience in our strong ties. And thinking about the last couple of years and it being a difficult 2 years for many folks, maybe all of us, right? Stress, health concerns, worry, things just not being the way we're used to it, the uncertainty, the political environment, there's a lot going on. And then to add in to the social support and the concern and the time that goes into strong ties, those are important. But it is relaxing to know that you can just easily connect with someone without all these expectations. The second reason why we definitely need these casual friends is that you can explore a different part of you. So highlight a different part of your personality. So not only would I say I had weak ties with like the Penn State Alumni Association, I had weak ties at the university that I worked at in Pennsylvania when I lived in New York, and that I had weak ties from the gym or the sewing studio that I went to. So, the weak ties might not have overlap to all those different areas, right? Like Penn State, Mansfield sewing, the gym, right? I can just focus on one part of who I am. And then certainly when you're interacting with all these different folks, you can gain a different perspective. And that was something that I find really valuable and really grateful for from that time I spent with all the different folks from the Penn State Alumni Association in New York. And they bring variety. Maybe they get you to do something that you wouldn't normally do, right? So it's like, well, normally my friends and I go do X. It might be like, we hang out and watch TV. And this person's like, let's go to a smash room. I don't even know what they're called. The rooms where you can just go in and there's like glass and things that you can just like destroy. I want to do that. And that is something I don't normally do. I want to smash things. I want to go around and Hulk it up after the last 2 years. And perhaps another good reason for casual friends is that you can be honest with each other. There's perhaps no hang-ups or the history, or, it might just be like, oh, that makes sense. Thank you for letting me know what you think. And that can be really good. And another reason it's very grown-up sort of friendship, I guess. So, sorry, I laugh as I say that, but sometimes I laugh about feeling grown up because I'm nearly 44 and I still don't feel grown up. So maybe more weak ties will help me do it, friends. Will you join me in the weak tie challenge so that we can all feel more grown up? But the idea here is that you don't have to have an emotional connection and sort of separating out the different types of people in our lives, right? And going into that, there's certainly a lack of history that Kat George describes as being refreshing, that you can create a new history or that you don't have history quite yet, and so there isn't all the baggage that comes along to it. And then finally, a good reason to focus on these weak ties and casual friends is that they can fit into our life conveniently. So it's like, I have time today. Hey, what's going on? Don't have time another day? I don't have to ask what's going on, right? There isn't, again, going back to number one, there isn't the pressure. So it can be both convenient and relaxing. So that's a lot of reasons, and I'm sure we could all generate many more reasons to add to this list for why we would enjoy having our casual friends and weak ties more in our life than we've had in the last 2 years. So friends, do you miss these weak ties? I have to say there are some that I miss and others I do not. I do not miss the trying to get into work, running late, and then having like 27 hall conversations on the way there, and then trying to get work done, and then people in and out of the office. Like, I guess I do enjoy those things, but after 2 years, I think that would be really difficult for me to do. Like, hashtag awkward. I'm trying to get my work done. But, sometimes it could be nice to have the break. So maybe I'm just being crabby Alysa who had her ship shopper stolen, and now I have to do something I haven't done in 2 years, right? Okay, maybe that's it. Maybe you've done something to keep these ties going or to recreate them. And so maybe you're like, I also have a ship membership. Maybe I should be adding people to my outer/inner circle of ship shoppers so that I can have that weak tie connection. Or do you see the term friendish meaning something else? Because I think there's another way to go, maybe where it doesn't quite feel like people are friends anymore, but you feel like you have to stay in the friendship. And I think that's a whole nother episode, right? And going back to the idea of like, maybe it's time for our friendship to end because we're not quite friends anymore. Maybe we're transitioning out of strong ties to weak ties to even potentially no ties. So tell me, I want to hear it all. email me or at me on social media. I love to hear your experiences and be able to share them in a future episode. So be sure to tell me all your stories about weak ties, ones from pre-pandemic, ones that maybe you've created during the pandemic, maybe even how or why you've missed them. Again, I just want to hear it all. But what's up next? Rachel from Hallmarkies podcast and Rachel Reviews is joining me to talk about one of the greatest friendship movies of all time. And oh my God, I'm so excited. Ferris Bueller's Day Off. I used to watch this movie so much on my VHS. I think I broke it like 3 times and had to keep buying it. And at that time, VHS tapes were like, what, $25? I mean, major purchase for a youngin'. But I'm so excited and I can't wait to talk about Ferris and Cameron and all the good and bad things from that movie. So until next time, friends, smile at someone new, say hi to others, and text your weak ties. Because without our casual friends, who would we be? Listening to Best Forevers. If you like what you hear, be sure to subscribe, rate, review, and of course, share with a friend. Please be sure to follow Best Forevers on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Best Forevers Pod, and I'm at Dr. Alysa Lucas on Twitter. You can always find the podcast webpage for more information at bestforeverspod.com and share your stories of friendship by emailing me at bestforeverspod@gmail.com. And if you'd like to support the movement to love on our friends more, check out the podcast on patreon.com/bestforeverspod. Now, friends, check out this recommended podcast that you must get in your ear holes immediately.
Hey, this is Kate. I'm a forensic psychologist and crisis clinician, and I collect stories. Everything from true crime to trauma to parenthood. There's a lot more in common between depression and sociopathy, or between serial killers and podcasters, than you might think. Are you sure you really want to know? This is Ignorance Was Bliss at iwbpodcast.com and IWB Podcast on social media.